The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings. 2021 NFL free agency day 2, not real free agency because that doesn't actually happen until Wednesday, but we got these reported signings, so I want to break it down from a fantasy angle from it. If you want to hear more about the overall signings, tune into Tuesday's show or tune into Monday's show as we recap day 1 of everything up on Mayo Media Network. Please subscribe to Mayo Media Network right now if you haven't done that. Also, smash the like button to the episode. And who do you think is the worst signing fantasy-wise for any player that has signed so far? Anything that has not happened as of this recording, shockingly enough, we will not be getting to on this show. I know that's a difficult concept for a lot of people to run through their brains, but that's just the reality of the situation. We'll be tuning back in later on in the week once most of the stuff is wrapped up. More people have signed because none of the huge wide receivers have signed so far, and we're going to want to talk about that. But Fantasy Spin today from theathletic.com, we got Jake Ciely on the line. What's going on, my man?
Not too much, well, a lot in the past day or two that all of a sudden, I think I was joking about it on Twitter, said, remember the days when it used to be don't tamper at all, and then it was the NFL was like, all right, we'll let you, and we're going to keep monitoring, and now it's just like, screw it, everybody sign whatever the hell you feel like it.
Yeah, legal tampering period. I like it, though. It's almost like the NBA, where it gives you something to talk about, and that's all the NFL is trying to do. You make this a 12-month-a-year sport. You need something to fill in because people aren't like, you can't go to the Combine this year, right?
No, I actually would have been there, well, last week-ish, somewhere. It kind of depends. I don't know exactly where it would have fallen, but yeah, I should have been there. It would have been a lot of fun, but no, there's no Combine this year. There's only pro days, and even those are very limited who's allowed to be there. But yeah, so you have the Combine, but we still had the NFL free agency around this time anyway, and then next month is the draft, and then now that, yeah, like you said, football is 12 months a year. It doesn't stop.
No, and this is good for the media cycle to get people back talking about the NFL to drown out some of the March Madness coverage. If you're looking for golf, March Madness, hockey, or baseball coverage, all new up on Mayo Media Network right now as well. If you're listening to the audio podcast of this, you know it's coupled together in one mega show with the golf DraftKings picks of the day. So, I didn't want to make you download 2 things. You can just download one thing. Makes it much easier. You can just, I guess if you're listening to this part now, you've already skipped the golf or already listened to it. So thank you for tuning in to all of it. So to timestamp this is 1:00 p.m. Eastern time on a Tuesday afternoon. The Jags have just signed Shaq Griffin to a 3-year deal. So we don't really care about that for fantasy purposes. What we care about is what the...
Hey, I care about it for my $20 bet on DraftKings Sportsbook the day after the Super Bowl, where I said, look, Trevor Lawrence, a ton of free agency money and free agent, all that type of stuff, plus the draft. I put $20 on the Sportsbook on the Jaguars to win the Super Bowl.
What were their odds?
I do care. Plus 10,000.
All right, so 100 to 1. All right, so you win $2,000 if they win. All right, well, let's go Jags. Let's figure it out.
Let's go Jags. Yeah.
Let's start in New England. They made 4 fantasy impact signings. Well, I don't know how impactful they're going to be, but they made signings with skill players, so let's talk about them. 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, both going to New England. Nelson Agholor now in New England. Kendrick Bourne now in New England. Let's just start with tight end. Henry and Jonnu. Okay. Are they going to ask any of these guys to block?
Yeah. So, there's a couple things here. Look, and I'm reading it off because I have the stats here. So Jimmy Eisenberg tweeted out when I was looking it up, so he saved me the trouble. But Cam Newton averaged 118 targets to Greg Olsen from 2012 to 2016. All right, 118 targets. Well, obviously that's not enough if you split it between the two of them. And even if you gave somebody 60-40, but the point being there is to take it further as what your next question is and saying about the blocking. As I look this up, and Hunter Henry has yearly been better than Jonnu Smith as a blocker, according to PFF. His worst season is close to the best season of Jonnu. So if you say that, you assume one of the two is going to be able to block more than the other. That's Hunter Henry. On the flip side of it, Jonnu's excitement that we saw is, so he has 1.59 yards per route run to 1.35 for Henry. On the flip side, Smith ran 18.8 routes while Henry ran 32.4. So Henry's coming down, but where it was, Jonnu was going up a lot because he could have had all those targets. He could have been on the field running routes a hell of a lot more and those yards per route run. We were excited for it. He should probably run a few more than Henry, but now I wouldn't be surprised if their year-end numbers are very similar. And from a week-to-week standpoint, it's going to be infuriating. Like I would say they finish as low-end tight end ones, but I don't want either of them.
Well, it just strikes me that New England is making moves on defense. They're going to get a lot of defensive starters back who opted out from a year ago. And with Cam Newton back at quarterback, this just strikes me as a supremely run-heavy offense. And then you're just not going to have the overall target share coming from Cam because he's just not going to throw the ball that much. Now, this could completely change by the time the NFL draft comes around, and maybe they opt into a different situation under center, maybe after week 4 or something like that, or hell, maybe even to start the season. But you'd have to think that both these guys are probably outside the top 10 in this offense.
Definitely. Even if the situation was a different quarterback, this isn't going to happen. But even if you brought in Deshaun Watson or something like that, well, obviously this isn't a team that's rumored for him really, but hell, if they would have been the ones that signed Fitzpatrick when we get ready to talk about him, even if you give him a quarterback situation that passes more, runs fewer times than Cam Newton and this offense as a whole, and you could say they'll pass a little bit more. We've seen Cam Newton pass. We've seen Cam Newton reach the high 3,000s and 30 touchdowns, and I don't think he's going to ever get back to that. Cam Newton as a whole, I do believe when he started coming back last year and how the COVID impacted him, he went to a new team. He was learning a new playbook. He missed all those weeks. I had Brian McFadden on the podcast who was talking about Antonio Brown when he signed, wouldn't show up till December, that Gronkowski wasn't going to show up until the middle of the season, all those type of things, because there's a big impact of being able to practice and actually practice with a team and how the rookies were going to come along slow. And we saw all of that. All that came to fruition because of time with the team. So I do believe Cam to a degree. Do I think he's going to be great? No. But can he pass for 3,300 yards and 23 touchdowns, somewhere around there? Sure. But now when we haven't even gotten to the wide receivers, there's just too many pieces here. Like the cliche of too many mouths to feed. This is actually when it holds true. Just Cam Newton, even at his best, is not going to throw for 4,000 yards. And even if we had somebody throw for 4,000 yards, we would still be hesitant of both tight ends in a week-to-week basis. So top 10, probably not. Fringy top 10, low-end tight end 1. You could see maybe Jonnu more likely than Henry, and both of them be around there. But again, I'm going to go back to the point of it could be 1 week Jonnu, next week Henry, next week Henry, next week Jonnu, next week neither of them, and that's the problem.
Unless one of them establishes themselves as the dominant red zone presence on this team, I'm completely with you. And we're not going to know that before the season, obviously, so it's going to be tough to draft them. But it does sound like you're going to get some discount options. I was actually looking at best ball results from this morning. Not a huge sample, but both these guys going outside the top 13 at tight end to kick off the year. So then you introduce Agholor, you introduce Bourne, who's been a good red zone presence in San Francisco over the past few years, sort of a pesky guy to have on that field when you play any of the other San Francisco 49ers. Like, oh, good. Kendrick Bourne has 3 catches for 2 touchdowns and 3 yards. Fantastic news. But like Edelman's coming back, isn't he? You still have N'Keal Harry. I'm curious to see what happens with the rest of this Patriots offense and whether they just start cutting guys.
Yeah, so cutting guys and or trading. We've already heard the rumors of N'Keal Harry be on the trading block.
Oh, great. So what are they going to get him? Like they'll have to here, have N'Keal Harry and a 4th round pick and you can take him?
I mean, that's how bad it's pretty bad. Like they're kind of pulling the Dave Gettleman of sell high or sell low instead of selling high. So yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see if Harry's there. The one, actually, I don't know that Gettleman's a guarantee, only because at this point of his career with the injury stacking up and what apparently the Patriots are doing, do the Patriots bring him back? Because the thing with Kendrick Bourne is even with Debo, even with George Kittle, even with Brandon Ayuk, who did run a hell of a lot on the outside as he can, he still is in the slot almost 40% of the time. And you mentioned it. He's like a slot red zone presence. If he's there, do you run him outside that much? And even if so, it seems like at best case, he's the number 3 wide receiver. If I don't know, maybe Edelman doesn't come back, then you run Agholor and Bourne as your 1 and 2, and they get rid of Harry. But there's just a lot here. If things are going to have to clear up, I mean, Agholor as of today is the number 1 wide receiver, whether or not Harry's there, whether or not, Edelman's 100% is the only one that could throw the wrench into that. If Edelman's back and he's anything close to what he was, then sure, he'll be the number 1 and Agholor the number 2. And in that case, it's similar to the tight ends. You don't really want either of them. I hate to do it. They're only valuable in best ball because everybody's valuable in best ball, but I don't want any of them in seasonal.
Can you see a path where Agholor has a good season here?
Yeah, if Edelman's done, if Edelman's toast, and they do, I don't even know if they do need to trade N'Keal Harry. Agholor last year, look, he broke out and he was obviously not completely done for with the Eagles, and there was something left with him. Do I think last year is potentially the best we'll see? Sure. Is he going to cap out probably as a low-end wide receiver 3? Also sure, especially playing with Cam Newton. But can he still have value? Yes, as well. But I think a lot of it depends on whether or not, if Edelman's back, I don't see him being more than like a wide receiver 5, just because, again, we're talking about Cam Newton, 2 tight ends, Edelman, and him. That's a lot of pieces for a run-heavy and a not pass-heavy offense.
All right, let's stick in the division. Let's go to the Jets. They signed Corey Davis. That goes along with Mimsy and Jameis.
How many times did Tim tweet you?
Oh, my God. The text exchange I've been on with Tim. Because we recorded the show yesterday, and we put it out right away. And then that signing happened like an hour later. It's like, fuck, I really wish this would have happened while we were on the show. He's already telling me that Corey Davis, is like the best receiver in football now. And that Agholor, he liked Agholor, but Agholor is trash now that he signed with the Patriots. Corey Davis, like, he's the greatest. This is very reminiscent to last year when he told me that Brashad Perriman was a top 5 receiver in the NFL the moment he signed with the Jets. So if the Patriots are trying to sell low on N'Keal Harry, it does kind of feel like the Jets bought high on Corey Davis here.
It feels like they did, but so you know this because you brought it up before, and I wasn't even trying to play victory lap when you did it, but like he was good this year's Devontae Parker, but I didn't expect it to be that good, even calling for that. And I do think what we just saw is part of why Corey Davis broke out, because he had an alpha across from him. As much as I loved him coming out of college, I think like some wide receivers, he's a great 1B. Like, I'm not putting him all the way down as a number 2, but he needs somebody on his level, preferably better than him, to really do what he did last year at the NFL level, unless he's going to take another step forward. And my problem there is with Sam Darnold as of today, obviously, but Sam Darnold, this offense, I don't see him taking another step forward because he's going to get number 1 coverage. Jamison Crowder is a target machine, and we know that, and has a great rapport with every quarterback he's played with when healthy, sure. Denzel Mims is headed into his 2nd season. I'm not the biggest Mims fan, but he's going to be a factor. So you have 3 wide receivers. He's going to get the number 1 attention. You still have Sam Darnold at quarterback. So unless they make a massive upgrade at quarterback, and I'm not talking about, I love Fields, but I'm not talking about Fields or Wilson because that's a rookie. A rookie quarterback I don't think is that big of an upgrade over Sam Darnold. So unless Deshaun Watson walks onto this field, somebody by a trade, I think Corey Davis is exactly what he was last year, a wide receiver 3, even being the number 1 with the Jets. And I know Tim right now is cursing me watching this.
Well, unless Mims makes a significant leap in year 2, which is possible, I suppose. He did refer to himself as a Michael Thomas type, so maybe his words will come to fruition with that. But he was banged up for a lot of the beginning of last year, then got hurt for a bit. Then Joe Flacco was playing quarterback, so maybe you can give him a bit of a pass, and maybe he can take a leap to be a wide receiver 1. But kind of the way that you see it right now is they have 3 wide receiver 2s. And we're 3 years past the point where Chris Herndon's going to be the best tight end in the NFL. So it's a bit problematic from that regard. They knew, like, did Brashad Perriman get cut? Like, is he still on this team?
He's a free agent. So here's the thing, and you bring up Brashad Perriman when I was about to go, 60 vacated targets. That's it. 60. So I put this in the breakdown. I said, even if you take Braxton Berrios' 55, say Berrios doesn't even exist anymore because he wasn't really supposed to be used that much last year. But even if you took that, now you have 115 targets between Perriman and Braxton Berrios. Those aren't all going to go to Corey Davis if Mims is going to his 2nd season and improves. And if you look at Crowder's was over 12 games because of missed time. Mims was over, I think he was 9 games. 9 games. So you have his missed time. Again, sorry, I'm getting a frog in my throat over here. I don't think that you're going to see the volume for Corey Davis to be a wide receiver 2 or better. That's the biggest thing, is he needs 100-plus targets, because 100-plus targets as the number 1 with Sam Darnold or whatever quarterback, there's a lot there. So, yeah, I think that you're just asking too much given the situation, the quarterback, and the target share.
I swear to God, like, Jeff Smith had 45 targets for the Jets last year, because I remember playing that jabroni on DraftKings at like 3K one week, and he was just horrible. Either way, if you had to rank the Jets receivers as of this moment with Sam Darnold being at quarterback, I think number 1 is still very clearly Jamison Crowder, isn't it?
I would still go Crowder, just especially if we're doing half and full point PPR. Maybe you can make a case for Corey Davis and non.
Do people even play not like no PPR whatsoever?
Surprisingly, they still, by the way, 37 targets for Jeff Smith. You weren't far off. Herndon had 45 in 16 games. But yeah, there's still a surprising amount from people that got to get in the questions of the rankings last year in the column that still play non-PPR. So yes, they still are out there. So that's the only case you can make. It's funny, what, 5-6 years ago, Pat, and we're like all of a sudden like, if you play in PPR, now it's like if you play in non-PPR. But that's the only area I could see Corey Davis edging out Jamison Crowder. But you know what? If you wanted to take Davis over Crowder just because it's safe to say at this point that Jamison Crowder is an injury risk every single year. There's no question about it.
No, that's true. And I think if you're shooting for upside, Corey Davis has that potential. But I think I would if I was shooting for upside on the Jets, I'd probably just take Mims at, 3 times less the cost, at least presumably right now, and that's probably how it's going to shake down. If I wanted consistency and then try to gamble on like health luck, Crowder would most definitely be that guy for me. Here's an interesting one. The Jags have upgraded their offensive line. They signed Phillip Dorsett as a speed option, which probably means the end of Keelan Cole, I'm guessing. And Carlos Hyde signs as a backup, which is fantastic news for James Robinson.
And that's where I agree. I actually said that no real threat. James Robinson's locked inside the top 10 as I had him at their way too early rankings. And that was because I could have been wrong, and we could still be wrong. Like, I could still be wrong. They could still draft somebody and draft a pass catcher, which would be the bigger threat to James Robinson. But Carlos Hyde, outside of one season, hasn't been that big of a pass catcher in the NFL. And I'm not saying he can't catch the ball, but he just really hasn't been used that way. This is just to, keep James Robinson safe. Is Carlos Hyde going to get a bigger share than any Jaguars running back did last year? Sure, because I think if you add them all up, it was maybe 3% of the work. So James Robinson is not going to be seeing 95, 97% every single week. But you drop him down to 90% with a good offensive line, Trevor Lawrence and a better offense around him, and you can have the efficiency offset the lost touches percentage-wise. Carlos Hyde, again, not a threat to take James Robinson's job. Going from Jamison Crowder to James Robinson makes me want to keep saying Jameson. But yeah, James Robinson, this is good news. Unless, again, like I said, if they draft a pure pass catcher like a Tariq Cohen type out of this draft, then you get mildly concerned.
Yeah, so I like Robinson, and the way that I would look at it, it's not necessarily like a 95%, 90% split. If I can find a running back that garners 75% of his team's snaps in any given week, that guy is a stud running back, at least just based on volume. And he is going to be above that number, at least right now. Because Carlos Hyde's fine, and he's someone that you can play in a pinch to give like 7 touches to a game if you really want to. But we've just been down this road way too often, and it's not happening.
No, 100%. And, even in time with replacing other people like with the Seahawks, there's like little blips here and there, but it wasn't really the guy performance-wise even. So I'm not worried about Carlos Hyde being here. I know people are drawing the dots or connecting the dots with Urban Meyer and back to Ohio State and all that type of stuff. But no, that's probably the familiarity that brought him over there, but it's not it. And I think somebody tweeted this yesterday. I completely forgot Carlos Hyde has been on this team before.
I don't remember him being on the Jags. When the hell was he on the Jags?
Somebody said he was with the Jags earlier. Maybe that person was wrong.
Maybe you're thinking of Fred Taylor.
No, they said what did he say? I'm trying to find the tweet. He was with Jacksonville in 2018. Cleveland and Jacksonville in 2018. See?
That doesn't exist in my memory at this point.
Since
then he's been on what, Kansas City, Seattle, and Houston?
No, just Seattle and Houston.
Wasn't he on Kansas City at one point, or did they let him go before the year?
I think now you're mistaken.
Yeah, enough teams just all these backup running backs. But the point was going to be that this is good news for James Robinson. Phillip Dorsett doesn't really move the needle for me, but it's like I guess they threw cold water on the DJ Chark trade, right?
That was never a thing. Apparently that was somebody out there who had like predicted 1 out of 50 like signings a couple years ago, and then tweeted out the Hunter Henry or the Jonnu thing. I think it was the Jonnu thing. Tried to predict that, and he was off on the money, but he like took it as a victory lap. So then he tweeted out that DJ Chark was in a trade likely to happen for Orlando Brown and picks involved, and Khan came out and was like, that's a bunch of crap. So that's all you need to know.
I mean, I like DJ Chark, but I like that trade. That was a good trade, I think, for Jacksonville and for Baltimore.
And I think that's what he is. He's trying to make sense out of it. That would have been miserable for DJ Chark fantasy wise.
Sure, but I think just for both teams in like real life, I think that was a great move.
I think that was a fine move. Yeah, I think that would have made a lot of sense, but thankfully that did not happen if you like DJ Chark.
This is true. So let's move to the Fitzmagic. Ryan Fitzpatrick signs in Washington. He's presumably the starter. He'll battle it out with Tyler Heineke, it looks like, or Heineke, sorry. It looks like. My one note on this is the guy who's being drafted, albeit it's very early, and played through like 2 high ankle sprains last year. My guy, Scorin McLaurin, top 10. Let's go.
I have no problem with that. It's like McLaurin was outside my wide receiver ones just barely in my way too early rankings. And the biggest thing with Fitzpatrick, and I have the numbers here from the article where I was posting all this type of stuff. So one, I'll go to Ian Hartitz from Pro Football Focus, mentioned the fact that in 10 seasons of 10 plus starts for Patrick, Hushmanzada had 137 targets. Stevie Johnson had 148, 141, 134. Andre Johnson, 146. Brandon Marshall, 128, 173. Devontae Parker, 128. Terry McLaurin's getting his damn share of his targets. They're coming. It's going to be exactly what it was last year, potentially even a little bit more. So Terry McLaurin getting Fitzpatrick, assumably for 16 games. Yeah, wide receiver 1. It would still be a low-end wide receiver 1, but you put him there. And now we can say Logan Thomas, yes, he can repeat as a top 10 tight end. And I don't know if I thought Corey Davis made a lot of sense for Washington, but if they don't address the wide receiver 2 position and it's Kelvin Harmon coming back from another injury or Antonio Gandy-Golden going to his second year, either one of those could pop off as a wide receiver 4 because Fitzmagic's going to be throwing the ball.
Yeah, and just look at the performance that Ryan Fitzpatrick has made, the difference he has made to wide receivers even over the past 3 years. Like before Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay, it was Fitzmagic getting it done with Godwin and Mike Evans. He made Devontae Parker a thing in Miami, and it might not necessarily translate to wins on the field, but whoever the wide receiver 1 is on these teams gets propped up.
100%. So I'm really interested to see if they do bring it. Because they didn't bring in Corey Davis. Who would make a ton of sense to get excited about? Your boy, Marv. Bring in Marvin Jones.
Marvin Jones would be a nice compliment to Terry McLaurin, I think. Just being a big-bodied receiver. Not to say that McLaurin's tiny, but he has that after the catch. He has that speed element to him as well.
I think that'd be terrific. I think Marvin Jones would hold pretty much the exact same value he had with the Lions. He had a little bit touchdown reliant, but as a wide receiver 4 with potential weekly wide receiver 2 upside, Marvin Jones, Terry McLaurin, Fitzpatrick, Logan Thomas, and now you get potentially, whatever they do in the backfield, at least starts with Antonio Gibson. This is going to be a scary offense all of a sudden.
Yeah, I like it. New Orleans restructures Taysom Hill and signs him to $3 billion, but they'll never have to pay him that money. And then they re-sign Jameis Winston. Now there's talk about an open competition between these two for the starter's job. You got to think it's Jameis, right? Why else bring him back at this? Why would he sign there knowing that he can sign with Chicago and be a starter, or he can sign with New Orleans and be a backup?
Yeah, so, real quick breaking news. We don't have to worry about Rob Tonyan.
Yeah, no, I have that one. I have that one written down for the end.
Okay, so Jameis Winston, I said the same thing. I don't think you sign him. And yes, it is a 1-year deal, and that Taysom Hill contract is the NFL's all of a sudden going to do something. They ruined it. Just like Bill Belichick ruining things when he figured out that loophole in the formation on the field. The NFL was like, okay, cool, you did that, but now we're stopping it. I think the same thing's going to happen with that Taysom Hill nonsense. But I think both of them, they're in an open competition in quotes, but I agree with you with the Winston situation. He's going in. I assume that he's assuming he's the front runner unless he just bombs. So if Winston's that quarterback, if Taysom Hill's a quarterback, either one of them, we know from Drew Brees is a downgrade for Kamara. Kamara was in the conversation to be number 2, number 3 running back, no overall player off the board. But now with Winston, now with Hill, he takes that downturn to probably tier 2 of running backs, which isn't a huge drop, but it just takes him off that threat of being the number 2. What this really does, for especially if Winston is the quarterback, is it props up not only Michael Thomas, but whoever the number 2 wide receiver is, and then whether or not it ends up being a number 3 wide receiver or a tight end and Adam Trotman, whatever the number 3 option is going to get a boost too, because Jameis Winston doesn't get back to throwing for almost 6,000 yards, but what was it, 5,100 or 5,200 that year? If he only throws for 4,600, it's still more aggressive and still better than what the Saints were doing. The Saints only attempted 522 passes last year. So maybe he gets to 575, also short of his 600-plus attempts, but 575 from Winston is going to get close to 30 touchdowns again and is going to get you 4,800 yards. So, yeah, boost to everybody, but the downgrade is with Kamara, unfortunately.
And a lot of that just, I think, has to do with the receiving totals, because Jameis is not necessarily a check down king. He's not afraid to take the – well, he just loves looking downfield and forcing the ball. Maybe that's changed after being under Sean Payton a year in the system to try to –
Well, that's the big thing, too. had that. So he threw to running backs 18.9% of the time past 2 years. Alex Smith was the leader actually the past 2 years, but Drew Brees was second at 28.5%. So it's almost a 10% point drop to go from Brees to Winston at quarterback throwing to running backs.
One difference you could make in that is that Jameis didn't have Alvin Kamara in Tampa Bay.
Sure.
Knowing that that's such a large part of his game and how effective he can be in the passing game, that maybe we do see an uptick in that number. Maybe. I don't know.
Oh, I say uptick in number. That's why I say Kamara's not a huge. Like, I'm not putting Kamara all the way down with, the James Robinson tier, which would be the tier 3 of running backs, in my opinion. But it just really knocks him from being number 2.
Potentially, you could also look at it a different way, too, where whether it would be Taysom Hill or Drew Brees, that the A-dot on both those guys' passes are pretty low. Although Taysom Hill did take a few shots, you just assume that Jameis is going to be looking down the field a little bit more, and all of a sudden the defense just can't cheat up to box in Kamara, that maybe his long runs come back again, where we saw that kind of stunted the past 2 years. Like that would be a case, at least.
Or bigger arrow routes and wheel route yardage totals. That'd be fun too.
Yeah. So New Orleans, things are looking up. If Jameis is the quarterback, probably looking down if Taysom is the quarterback. The only other two I really have, and Bob Tonyon's one of them, Devontae Booker signs with the Giants. There is a late round handcuff to draft.
Yes. That's the only thing. And I scoffed at first just because, it's Booker, but that's really what it is, because Wayne Gallman's not coming back. Alfred Morris is a free agent. I don't even know if they really had anybody else on the roster. Elijah Penny is a fullback. So, yeah, that's the reason you do it, is because at this point, this is 2 years in a row now for Saquon Barkley. So we all hope he can stay healthy, and I would still take him number 2, number 3 running back off the board, because he's the only person that can really contend with Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey. But that's a huge risk at this point with what we've seen for 2 years in a row. So, yes, I do agree with you. Devontae Booker is out there. He's a great late-round handcuff to have.
Yeah, because he does really feel like he will be the next man up if something happens to Barkley again. And he's not one of those handcuffs where you're like, oh, he's in like a split situation. You could play Kamara and Latavius Murray both at the same time. Now, if Saquon Barkley is hurt, you can play Devontae Booker. If he's not hurt, you don't play him. It's just a bench spot. Those are my favorite types of handcuffs in a way. Like, I like Murray just because of his upside is so high in the Saints offense if something happens to Kamara. But at the same time, like, people get duped into playing him in different weeks. It was like Alexander Madison going into last season. Like, that was sort of the thing. It was like, well, Dalvin Cook is so great, but you could play Madison as a flex if you wanted to. It's like, no, you can't. He's not good.
And it was like maybe 5 touches, and then you hope that, okay, he got the 40 and a touchdown this week. See, I told you could use them. No, you can't, like you just said. No,
yeah, and well, some of it is like protection against.
If there's anybody else,
it's like protection against yourself in fantasy drafts. Some people just, if you go into it knowing that these guys are a bit more inflated, knowing what their role can be, and they do have this baked in at least idea that you could play them in weeks where the starter is still healthy, that they end up with like an 8th round, 9th round ADP, where these other guys have 16th round ADP, or even larger than that, depending on the format that you play in. Maybe they're free agents heading into the season. But as long as you just tell yourself, I'm not going to play these guys, if you have that discipline, then it's fine. You can take the pick on them and you can save them because you know that they're running back ones if anything does happen to the starter. I can't say that about Devontae Booker. He's probably just a guy you can play, fill in as a flex if Barkley is out. Maybe he can be like running back 15 or something like that just based on volume. But enough people fall into the situation where they spend the draft capital on a player like an Alexander Madison. Now they feel obligated to play him, which is the wrong idea. Yeah, Tony Pollard's going to be the same way. And he's going to have good weeks. He'll have like 3 of them if Zeke plays every single game. But you're not going to know when those weeks are coming.
No, you're not. So there's like a whole litany of them. And for the longest time, remember, like the only ones you can say, you brought up Latavius Murray. If we get a clear answer, who's the complement with Austin Eckler next year, that could be another one. But those are few and far between. I'm with you. I'd rather have the guy. I don't usually draft Latavius Murray because of the cost, but like also you said, is like I'd rather just have the guy that I know steps into a situation where they're not necessarily as good, but they get 70% of the work, than trying to say like, all right, well, maybe he can hopefully get 10 touches this week. Yeah, maybe, hopefully. Yes, please. Oh, it's going to be another situation next year? The Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Damian Williams messed it, and they just brought back they brought back Darrell Williams too, so screw that whole situation.
Fun. I actually end up with Latavius almost every single year because you get the 3 weeks where he's like a top 5 running back, and that's good enough for me.
It depends on where his cost is. I'm always in drafts where he's going in the 7th, 8th round, and I'm never just going to do that.
I usually take him in the 8th. I feel like that's fine. If I can get 3 weeks, and I mean, granted, it leads to Kamara getting hurt, but That tends to happen a few times every year. But if you can get those 3, like almost guaranteed, at least let's say top 10 weeks from a running back in the 8th round, like it's usually better than my 8th round pick.
Yeah, it definitely could be. Are we going to talk rumors?
No, I just wanted to talk about Bob Tonyan for a second. He re-signs with the Packers, it seems. None of this is official. This is still the tampering period. Wednesday is actually the first official day of free agency, so you might get, what's his name, Anthony Barr backing out from signing with the Jets again or something like that. But
that's what I said with Jonnu. Like, what happens if Jonnu backs out and then it's just Hunter Henry? That'd be great.
Yeah, then it's a different situation, obviously. And then the first 10 minutes of this show, just go down the tubes. Fun times for us. But Robert Tonyan, like, I'd much rather have him than Henry or Jonnu if they're both in New England.
1,000%. And that's even if they finally give Aaron Rodgers a second wide receiver, still rather have Robert Tonyan. There's not even a question there because I just don't want to split tight. I don't even like tight ends in general after the first 4 or 5, let alone somebody splitting with another player. Like, that was their biggest complaint with O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate. Remember, I mean, before even all this mess started, it was O.J. Howard, oh my God, he's unstoppable. But then they kept asking him to block because he's such a good blocker. And Cameron Brate's out there getting 2 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. So we're just going to be doing the same thing. I'm with you. Robert Tonyan at TJ. You know what? Hawkinson, even with the downgrade at tight end, I'd say Higbee, now that Gerald Everett's gone. I'll say a lot of tight ends that are on their own. Even Evan Ingram, who can't hold on to the ball or stay healthy himself. Just give me a tight end that's not sharing work.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a second-round tender on Tonyan, by the way, so that's probably not going to be matched by a lot of people, and we'll see. And then
Irv Smith. Big Irv. Give me Big Irv instead of either of the tight ends with the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. Yeah, you don't worry about your what's the guy's name? Ty Conklin?
No, I don't worry about Ty Conklin too much. They do, but see, that offense does work in the 2 tight ends, but at least it's usually consistently the one over the other.
All right, that's what I got for all of the latest signings, at least fantasy-wise. Was there any other signing that piqued your interest?
No, because I'm assuming you already covered the whole, like, Dak, Cam,
yeah,
Tyrell Williams, and all those. So
yeah, I did that with Radcliffe last week. If people want to go check that out, of all the guys who had already signed or been franchised at that time. All right, we'll keep it quick. Jake Ciely at AllInKid on Twitter, theathletic.com. What kind of work you got coming up this week?
Doing the free agency tracker as it happens, if skill position, as it happens, and updating. By the way, the $1 offer is back, so $1 a month if you haven't signed up for it, which is just crazy. And then back to baseball for a little bit, but then rookies for the NFL draft. I'm happy for that. That starts next week.
Yeah, people want $100. You can get into a draw, just straight up $100 American dollars if you rate and review and subscribe to Fantasy Baseball Picks and Bets, a new show on Mayo Media Network. You leave an Apple Podcast review, 5 stars, something nice about the show, and your Twitter handle, email address, some way I can contact you. If you are a winner, we're drawing that on Monday for the $100 winner. So please support Mayo Media Network and subscribe to Fantasy Baseball Picks and Bets. You miss Garion? Then all of a sudden you can find Garion up there too, and your co-host is on this week doing rankings, DVR. So one of the hosts of one of the major fantasy baseball podcasts, lending his time over to Mayo Media Network this week as well. You can check out Mayo Media Network for all of the latest on every sport, except for the NBA. We're not deep diving on the NBA as of yet. We missed the boat on that, so we'll be on that next year. But either way, subscribe to the network and smash the like on the way out. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!